was saying, let me just start it
I
from the
see.
beginning.
Who is God, or what is the meaning of Allah? God says in the Quran, Allah is but one God. Okay, so let's talk about this, and let's talk about this for our brother Adem Ahmed. Okay, so first of all, we see that the word Allah does appear in the Ivrit. Okay, and so most Arabic is a downstream language from the original Hebrew. You can see many, many words in the Arabic that are very, very similar to the words you see in the Hebrew. Not modern Hebrew. I'm talking about biblical Hebrew. And they're also, and Aramaic the same way. Aramaic is downstream from the Hebrew. They're the same way. They're downstream languages. And so what you see in the Ivrit is you see names that are not names, but rather they're titles. So for instance, El, Elohim, Elohai, right? One of the names that appears, it appears in the book of Daniel, and it also appears in the book of Job, is Eloah, Eloah. Now, this is the same word that has been adopted in Islam as Allah. So Allah is not the name of the creator. It is the title that has been given because, again, there is a certain amount of respect inside even the Quran for the ineffable name doctrine. Even though the ineffable name doctrine is anti-scriptural. It's anti-scriptural. So what you see inside of Islam is you see this. You see that there is the idea, when you see it in the Shema, which also appears not only in Deuteronomy or Devarim, but also appears in the Gospel of Mark. Shema Yasharel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, Yahweh Echad. So this word Echad can mean one, but it also means alone, right? So when you understand this, Yahweh, our Elohim, Yahweh, alone, singular. There is no one besides Yahweh, okay? There's nothing behind Yahweh. There's no creator behind Yahweh. There is Yah, and that is, and then all the creation stems from that. All of creation is part of that. All of creation is engaged in that. There is nothing outside of Yahweh. Nothing. There is nothing outside. He populates an infinite number of dimensions infinitely. Okay, so there is nothing behind that. Okay, it's the absolute beginning and the end of everything. So we say, okay, so you say, well, Allah is one. But the doctrine that says Allah has no son is a doctrine that does not capture what is going on. Now, we've had this huge debate inside the Cepher community, where we have been plastered against the wall. In fact, it was the very first criticism that came against us because of Philippians 2:11, that Yahusha is Yahweh to the glory of Yah the Father. Now, the difficulty with this in the understanding in the Islamic world where this is misconceived is because when you take the idea of the word son, you're thinking to yourself, oh, well, this was a son that came through the birth canal. And the difficulty in the Gospels is that you have the Ben Adam and the Ben Elohim. And so when you talk about the Ben Adam, the son of man, and the son of Elohim in the same persona, well, that's an impossibility. But we see that in John chapter 1, it says, and the word was made flesh and tabernacled among us. So what we have to understand, and this is what I would say to the brothers and sisters in the Islamic world, is that when you see Yah, people think, well, look, we reject the idea that there's God in three persons. I agree with that. There's no God in three persons. That doesn't mean that there's not a Trinitarian aspect to Yah, but there's no three persons. There's one person. Because what does Mashiach say? If you have seen me, you have seen the Father. What does the prophecy of Yeshayahu say? Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Almighty El, the Everlasting Father. His name shall be called the Everlasting Father. That's the prophecy that's in Isaiah, right? The Sar Shalom, the Prince of Peace. Okay, so when we talk about in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim, And then the word was made flesh and tabernacled among us. That for the believer who is accepting of the premise that Yahweh Echad, Yahweh alone, Yahweh one, Yahweh singular, that of course you cannot see the burning fire that is Yahweh. This is what Peter says. He is a consuming fire. You cannot see him. Yet, Moses saw somebody, Isaiah saw somebody, John saw somebody, Daniel saw somebody. Who did they see? They saw what Yah had made present to us, which is Yah made himself manifest in the flesh that we might have a mediator, that we might see him. So there is no difference. Well, there is. There is a slight delineation between the manifestation of Yahweh on the earth as Yahusha and the Father in heaven, because the Father in heaven reserves unto himself when heaven and earth will pass away. Everything else is in the manifestation of Yahweh on the earth. So the doctrine of consubstantiality, he was with him in the beginning. He was with him in the beginning. So the difficulty with Islam is that Islam gets misled by the idea that they're expecting this son, because the term son is used. But the term son, this, like for instance, if you say bin Abraham in the Arabic, and bin Abraham, the son of Abraham, right? In the Hebrew, ben Avraham, but in the Arabic, bin Avraham. Okay, so when we look at this idea, this gives you the idea that it's the son of Abraham. But when we talk about Mashiach, it's something different than that. It's something more than that. And this was a huge debate inside the faith for 500 years, by the way, because the Arians said he was conceived. Therefore, he was born. There was no Mashiach before his conception. And yet the New Testament tells us replete that he was with the Father before the foundation of the earth, before time began. Well, what does that mean? He was with the Father before the time began. That there was a persona of Yah in existence before the time began. We call it a son. We call it a son, but that's in order for us to have a human framework to understand it. But the truth is, Yahusha was always a manifestation of Yahweh, the singular Echad Yahweh, from the very beginning. Now, let me just share this with the Muslim brothers too, Muslim brothers and sisters. Because one of the doctrines, there are two doctrines that come with Yahusha. There's a couple of new things that come too. One is, of course, baptism. The other is the casting out of demons. And you know, when you read the Quran, that the discussion of jinns is replete throughout the Quran. There's not a discussion of demons in the Old Testament. In the Tanakh, there's no discussion of demons, unless you read the book of Hanok, in which case you'll understand demons and devils. But there's a huge discussion of demons in the Quran, talking about the jinn. Go to the 144th surah of the Quran and read what Muhammad has to say about the jinns. So you know that this idea of demons and casting out demons, this was declared a new doctrine in the New Testament. Very first thing Mashiach did was cast out demons during the Shabbat. And this was declared a new doctrine. And what is this? We've never seen this before. And baptism, too, a new doctrine. But there were two things that were brought to the earth in Mashiach that were so critical, and this is critical to the Islamic world as well, these are the doctrines of love and forgiveness. The doctrines of love and forgiveness. Now, let me explain about how critical these are. If you look at the Torah of Moshe has the death penalty for many things. Oh, you missed the Sabbath, dead. Oh, you cut firewood, dead. Oh, you talked back to your parents, dead. Oh, you did this, dead. Take him out and stone him, right? In the King James, put him to death, right? Even though in the Hebrew it says, mut v'mut, shall die the death. But in English, that's translated to put him to death. Okay. Arguably, every single person is deserving of death. If Moshe is our judge in heaven, we're all dead. Because at some point you did one of those things, in which case you're subject to the death penalty. So because of this, mankind is separated from the Creator, from Yahweh. Mankind is separated. Mankind was destined to the same fate as the Nephilim, cast into a lake of fire of no forgiveness forever and ever. No chance of redemption, no chance to be retained in heaven. It is Mashiach who reconciles not the house of Yasharel, although he came first to the house of Yasharel, but he reconciled the whole world. He reconciled the whole world because he was the Lamb of Elohim. Now, this is a difficult concept, particularly in the Islamic world, to understand that there would be a lamb that could reconcile the whole of the world. But Leviticus 17:11 says, for the blood of the life of the flesh is in the blood, is in the blood. He and I have given it to you upon the altar. For his blood in your soul is redemption. So when we look at this idea that the blood of Mashiach would be this redemption, the doctrines of love and forgiveness come in. And under the doctrines of forgiveness and understanding that Yah has made himself into flesh that we might see him and know him and hear from him and smell him, eat with him, that this might happen, that we would have that kind of communication, open the door to the throne room itself. And because his blood was shed on the cross, there is no animal sacrifice that is required evermore. And the doctrine of forgiveness becomes present with the confession of your mouth and the belief in your heart. And suddenly, even though the Quran says that every man and every woman will be judged on their knees in hell for the works they have done, and even though your works are called to be part of your redemption schedule in the book of Revelation 3 times, nonetheless, the work of Mashiach on the cross brings forgiveness, atonement, propitiation. And suddenly, those sins of your life that are transmuted, those sins of your life that are transfigured, those sins of your life that are completely amalgamated to your soul are washed away. And the white linen of Mashiach covers you. And you are seen as one of the cells in the body of Mashiach, in his body himself. The one who comes to judge you, you are part of his body itself at the day of judgment. And you are no longer judged on your knees in hell, but rather you are forgiven and you are loved by the Father himself. And this is the true doctrine of Mashiach, rather than the doctrine that's been told by the church and the doctrine that was explained to Muhammad during his lifetime. See, it was a tainted doctrine that was explained to Muhammad. Not that Muhammad was wrong in his ideology. I'm just telling you that the ideology that he understood about Christianity was a tainted doctrine given to him by Romans. Okay. So with that, what I would say to you inside of Islam is that, Islam, like Judaism, claims a tie back to Abraham, right? All claim being children of Abraham. It's an Abrahamic religion. And let me just say this. The Quran gets a lot of grief because Muhammad married a 9-year-old and so on and so forth. There were a lot of things said horrible about the Quran during the Bush administration and so on. The Quran is not as wicked as the Talmud, not even close. It's not even half as wicked. It's not close. It's not even similar. The Talmud is by far the most wicked document on earth today. So if you're coming out of the practice of Islam, and one of the things I love about the Islamic people is that you guys like to reason. You like to talk. You have imams that like to talk about what's in the Quran. You have imams that like to express ideas. But let me just say this. Every person has 2 ears and 1 mouth, which means listen twice as much as you talk, right? And so I say to you that, as a brother to you, that we can live in this world together. Even if you and I have disparaging views upon one another, we can live in this world together. We don't have to call each other terrorists or bomb each other or blow each other up. We can live in this world together. That's easy to do, really quite easy to do, even though we are of different perspective. But I also say to you that my understanding of the Quran and the Hadith and the Sunnah and so forth is one that what I'm sharing with you today. And what I'm sharing with you today is not to nitpick the Quran, to say this, that, and the other thing, which is possible to do, as it is to do with the Tanakh. Very easy. But to say to you that the clarity inside the Quran would be to understand that Allah is a title and not a name. When you understand that aspect of it, it is a title and not a name. Now you begin your inquiry. Well, if it's not the name, then what is the name? Well, the name is given to us. And if you recall, the cow, the opening surah in the Quran, it proclaims Moshe was a prophet. It proclaims Abraham was a prophet, right? It proclaims these things in the opening of the Quran. What did Abraham have to say? What did Moshe have to say? I proclaimed his name. And what was his name written in all of their writings? Yahweh. Yahweh. Okay, that's my answer to your question.